Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Chapter 3. The Night Bus. Harry was several streets away before he collapsed onto a low wall in Magnolia Crescent, panting from the effort of dragging his trunk. He sat quite still, Angus still searching for him, listening to the frantic thumping of his heart. But after 10 minutes alone in the dark street, a new emotion overtook him, panic. Which way he looked at it, he had never been in a worse fix. He was stranded, quite alone in the dark Muggle world, with absolutely nowhere to go. And the worst of it was, he had just done serious magic, which meant that he was almost certainly expelled from Hogwarts. He had broken the decree for the restriction of underage wizardry so badly, he was surprised the Ministry of Magic representatives weren't sweeping down on him where he sat. Harry shivered and looked up and down Magnolia Crescent. What was going to happen to him? Would he be arrested, or would he simply be outlawed from the wizarding world? He thought of Ron and Hermione, and his heart sank even lower. Harry was sure that criminal of not. Ron and Hermione would want to help him now, but they were being blown abroad, and with Hedwig gone, he had no means of contacting them. He didn't have any Muggle money either. There was a little wizard gold in the money bag at the bottom of his trunk, but the rest of the fortune his parents had left him was stored in a vault at Gringotts Wizarding Bank in London. He'd never been able to drag his truck all the way to London, unless... He looked down at his wand, which he was still clutching in his hand. If he was already expelled, his heart was now thumping painfully fast. A bit more magic couldn't hurt. He had the invisibility cloak he had inherited from his father. What if he bewitched the trunk to make it feather-light, tied it to his broomstick, covered himself in the cloak and flew to London? Then he could get the rest of his money out of his vault and begin his life as an outcast. It was a horrible prospect, but he couldn't sit on his wall forever, or he'd find himself trying to explain to Muggle police why he was out in the dead of night with a trunk full of spellbooks and a broomstick. Harry opened his trunk again and pushed the contacts aside, looking for the invisibility cloak. But before he had found it, he straightened up suddenly, looking around him once more. A funny pricking on the back of his neck had made Harry feel that he was being watched, but the street appeared to be deserted, and no lights shone for any of the large square houses. He bent over to his truck again, but almost immediately stood up once more, his hand clutched on his wand. He had sensed rather than heard it. Someone or something was standing in the narrow gap between the garage and the fence behind him. Harry squinted at the back alleyway. If only it would move, that he'd know whether it was just a stray cat or something else. Lumos, Harry muttered, and a light appeared at the end of his wand, almost dazzling him. He held it high over his head, and the pebble-dashed walls of number 2 suddenly sparkled. The garage door gleamed, and between them Harry saw quite distinctly the hungry outline of something very big, with wide, gleaming eyes. Harry sped backwards. His hat hit his trunk as he tripped. His wand flew out of his hand as he flung out an arm to break his fall, and then he landed hard in the gutter. There was a defeating bang, and Harry threw up his hands to shield his eyes against the sudden blinding light. With a yell, he rolled back onto the pavement, just in time. A second later, a gigantic pair of heels and headlights had stretched to a halt where exactly Harry had just been lying. They belonged, as Harry saw when he raised his head, to a triple-decker, violently purple bus, which had appeared out of thin air. Gold lettering over the one-screen spelled, "The Night Bus." For a split second, Harry wondered if he had been knocked silly by his fall. Then a conductor in a purple uniform leapt out of the bus and began to speak loudly to the night. "Welcome to the Night Bus, of emergency transport to the stranded witch or wizard. Just stick out your one hand. Step on board and we can take you anywhere you want to go. My name is Dan Shunpike, and I will be your conductor this evening." This conductor stopped abruptly. He had just caught sight of Harry, who was still hidden on the ground. Harry snatched up his wand again and scrambled to his feet. Close to, he saw that Stan Shumpike was only a years older than he was, 18 or 19 at most, with large, protruding ears and a fair few pimples. "What were you doing over there?" said Stan, stopping his professional manner. "Fell over," said Harry. "Shoo fell over fall," sniggered Stan. "I didn't do it on purpose," said Harry, annoyed. One of the knees in his jeans was torn, and the hand he had thrown out to break his fall was bleeding. He suddenly remembered why he had fallen over and turned quickly around to stare at the alleyway between the garage and the fence. The night bus headlamps were flooding it with light, and it was empty. "What you looking at?" said Stan. "There was a big black thing," said Harry, pointing uncertainly into the gap, "like a dog with a mastiff." He looked around Stan, whose mouth was slightly open. With a feeling of unease, Harry saw Stan's eyes move to the scar on Harry's forehead. "What's that on your head?" said Stan abruptly. "Nothing," said Harry quickly, fluttering his head over the scar. If the Ministry of Magic was looking for him, he didn't want to make it too easy for them. "What's the name?" Stan persisted. "Neville Longbottom," said Harry, saying the first name that came into his head. So this bus," he went on quickly, hoping to distract Stan. "Did you say it goes anywhere?" "Yep," said Stan proudly. "Anywhere you like, long sit on a slant. Can't do nothing underwater. Here," he said, looking up suspicious again. "You did flag us down, didn't ya? Stuck on your wallet, did ya?" "Yeah," said Harry quickly. "Listen, how much would it be to get to London?" 11 sickles, said Stan. "But for 15 you get a chocolate, and for 15 you get an old water band. And a toothbrush, the color of your choice." Harry rummaged once more in his trunk, exactly his money bag, and showed him silver into his understand. He instead then lifted his trunk, with Hedwig's cage balanced on top, up the steps of the bus. There was no seats. Instead, half a dozen brass bedsteads stood beside the curtained windows. Candles were burning in brackets beside each bed, illuminating the wood-paneled walls. A tiny wizard in a nightcap on the rear of the bus muttered, "Not now, thanks. I'm picking some slugs," and rolled over in his sleep. "You have this one," Sam whispered, showing Harry's trunk under the bed right behind the driver, who was sitting in an armchair in front of the steering wheel. "This is our driver, Ernie Pang. This is Neville Longbottom, Ernie Pang, and a wizard, wearing very thick glasses, nodded to Harry, who nervously flattened his French again and sat down in his bag. "Take her away, Aaron," said Stan, sitting down in the armchair next to Ernie's. There was another tremendous bang, and next moment Harry found himself flat on his bed, thrown backwards by the speed of the night bus. Pulling himself up, Harry stared up to the dark window and saw that they were now bowling as well as completely Stan was watching Harry's stunned face with great enjoyment. "This is where he was before you flagged us down," he said. "Where are we, Aaron? Somewhere in Wales?" Said Ernie. "How come the muggles don't hear the bus?" said Harry. "Them," said Stan contemptuously. "Don't listen properly, do they? Don't look properly either. Never notice nothing, they don't." "Best go wake up Madame Smash, Stan," said Anne. "We'll be in Abergrowney in a minute." Stan passed Harry's bed and disappeared up a narrow wooden staircase. Harry was still looking out of the window, increasingly nervous. Ernie didn't seem to have mastered the use of a steering wheel. The night bus kept mounting the pavement, but it didn't hit anything. Lights of lamps, posts, letterboxes, and bins jumped out of its way as it rushed back into the position when it mast. Stan came back downstairs, followed by a faintly green witch wrapped in his traveling cloak. "Here we go, Madam Mouse," said Stan happily, as Aaron stepped off the brake and the bed slid a foot towards the front of the bus. Madame Marsh clamped a handkerchief to her mouth and trotted down the steps. Stan threw her back out after her and rammed the doors shut. There was another loud bang as they were thundering down a narrow country lane, trees slipping out of the way. Harry wouldn't have been able to sleep even if he had been traveling in a bus that didn't keep banging loudly and champing 100 miles at a time. His stomach churned and he fell to wondering what was going to happen to him and whether the Dursleys had managed to get Aunt March off the ceiling yet. Stan had unfurled a copy of the Daily Prophet and was now reading it with his tongue between his teeth. A large photograph of a sunken-faced man with long matted hair blinked slowly at Harry from the front page. He looked strangely familiar. "That man!" Harry said, forgetting his trouble for some moment. "He was in the Muggle News." Stanley turned to the front page and chuckled. "Sirius Black," he said, nodding. "Course he was in the Muggle News, Neville. Where have you been?" He gave a superior sort of chuckle at the blank look on Harry's face, removed the front page and handed it to Harry. "You ought to read the papers more, Neville." Harry had the papers up to the candlelight and read. "Black still at large. Sirius Black, possibly the most infamous prisoner ever to be held in Azkaban Fortress, is still eluding capture, the Ministry of Magic confirmed today. We are doing all we can to capture Black," said the Minister of Magic. culinary fudge this morning, and we begged the magical community to remain cool. Fudge had been criticized by some members of the International Federation of Warlocks for informing the Muggle Prime Minister of the crisis. Well, I really had to. I really had to, don't you know? Said an irritable Fudge. Black is mad. He's a danger to anyone who crosses him, magical Muggle. I have the Prime Minister's assurance that he will not breathe the words of Black's to identify to anyone. And let's face it, who'd believe him if he did? Fine Muggles had been told that Black is carrying a gun, a kind of lethal wand with Muggles used to kill each other. The magical community listened fear from Moscow like that to 12 years ago, when Black murdered 13 people with a single curse. Harry looked into the shadow eyes of Sirius Black, the only part of the sunken face that seemed alive. Harry had never met a vampire, but he had seen pictures of them in his defense against the dark arts classes. And Black, with his waxy white skin, looked just like one. Scaramouche